Can you live beside someone for 47 years and not truly know who they are? I thought it was impossible. I thought our life in the Fan District, Richmond, was an enviable one. A devoted husband, 2 grown children, a modest home that we had paid off. I thought his habit of waking up at 5 a.m. every day, for 6 years straight, was to go walking and take care of his heart health. I was even proud of it. But I was wrong. The truth, as I discovered, wasn't just an affair. It was an entire parallel life, a secret family with 2 other children, perfectly hidden just steps from my front door, right across the street. This is the story of how I exposed a 12-year lie, and how I made him pay for all of it, right in front of our family and friends at his own 75th birthday party. If you are listening from anywhere in the world, please leave a comment and subscribe, because some truths need to be spread, even if they shake your faith. Some stories, no matter how painful, must be told. It was a lie that was woven so slowly, so carefully, that when I finally realized it, I was already completely entangled in it, like an invisible spider web that grew larger and larger over the years. It all began one day in January of 2015. I remember the exact date because it was right after the Christmas holidays, when we still had the Christmas tree in the living room. Arthur came home from work that day with one of those health magazines they sell at 7-Eleven. He had it folded under his arm along with his empty lunchbox, which smelled of the ham and cheese sandwiches I had made for him in the morning. While I was preparing dinner in the kitchen, macaroni and cheese with a side of green beans that filled the whole house with that wonderful smell, Arthur took off his shoes at the entrance, as he always did, and mentioned that he had read an article about men our age. It said that we should exercise early in the morning, so that it is better for the heart. I was so focused on stirring the mac and cheese in the pot so it wouldn't stick, that I barely paid him any attention. I told him it seemed fine, that he should do whatever he wanted. At that moment, I didn't give it much importance. I wish I had paid more attention. I wish I had asked more questions. Arthur was 69 years old back then, but he looked younger than he was. He had been working for 30 full years at the same local Ace Hardware here in Richmond, where he had worked his way up to store manager. He was always a strong man, of a robust build, one of those who worked hard and didn't complain. Every day from 8 inches the morning to 6 inches the evening, Saturdays included, almost never missing a day. He was a responsible man, or so I thought. Our life in Richmond was simple, but comfortable. We lived in the Fan District, a quiet area of modest houses where all the neighbors knew each other. Ours was a 2-story house that we had bought with an FHA loan back in '82, when we were still young and had so many dreams. We finished paying it off about 15 years ago. After decades of effort, it was nothing luxurious or out of this world, but it was ours. It had 3 small bedrooms, a small patio in the back where I grew my pots with basil, mint, and cilantro, and a living dining room where we had watched our 2 children grow up. Michael, our oldest son, was 41 years old at the time. He became an accountant. He studied at the university with great effort. He married a good girl from Virginia Beach named Jessica and went to live there near the ocean. They have 2 beautiful children who at that time were my only grandchildren, or at least that's what I believed with all my soul. Caleb and Sophia, ages 8 and 6. Michael visited us every 2 or 3 months when his work allowed. He was always the more studious of the 2, the one who strived to get ahead and make something different of his life. Emily, our younger daughter, was 38 years old. She decided to stay here in Richmond, although she lives on the other side of the city, over in Scott's Addition. She is an elementary school teacher in a public school where she has been working for more than 15 years. She got divorced about 6 years ago from a man who didn't value her as he should have. Since then, she has lived alone in a small but nice apartment. She never had children because she said motherhood wasn't for her, that with the school children, she had enough. I always respected her decision, although deep down, I would have liked more grandchildren. She visits us every Sunday without fail for lunch. That has been our sacred tradition since she was a little girl. My daily routine was the simplest and most predictable. I got up every morning at 6 on the dot without needing an alarm clock because my body was already used to it. I prepared breakfast for Arthur, always something hearty because his job at the hardware store was tough. Bacon, eggs, hash browns, toast, and strong black coffee. I would see him off at the door with a kiss on the cheek. Afterwards, I would clean the entire house from top to bottom. I watched my soap operas in the afternoon while folding laundry. I prepared dinner with time to spare. I waited for my husband to come home from work. We would have dinner together watching the news with Lester Holt and go to bed around 10 at night. Like that every day for years and years without much variation. I remember once, maybe 10 years ago, I decided to do something different. I went to a salon and had my hair cut short and dyed a new lighter color. I spent the whole afternoon feeling excited, like a young girl again, wondering what Arthur would say. When he came home that night, he walked right past me, sat at the table, and asked what was for dinner. He never noticed. I cried a little in the bathroom, but then I told myself I was being silly. This is just what happens after decades of marriage. You become comfortable. You become furniture. I believed that. I accepted it. I never had to work outside the home. Arthur always earned enough to support us all. We weren't a rich family, not by any means, never that. But we didn't lack the basics either. We had enough for daily food, to pay the light and water bills, to treat ourselves once in a while, like going to the movies or buying a new blender when the old one broke. I went to the market on Tuesdays and Fridays religiously, always at the same time in the morning. I had been buying from the same vegetable stall for about 20 years. Mr. Peterson, the gray-mustached vegetable seller, would even set aside the best tomatoes and the freshest peppers for me, because he knew what time I arrived. On Sunday mornings, we went without fail to the 8 o'clock Mass at St. Paul's Episcopal Church, which is just 3 blocks from the house, a quiet walk. After Mass, we would stop by the little market that sets up outside the church to buy fresh donuts that were still warm. Glazed donuts, crullers, and crispy apple fritters. Arthur always bought 3 of each type, filling a large paper bag. He would say that way we'd have enough for the whole week, although I knew perfectly well that he would eat them all in 2 days at most, hiding in the kitchen when he thought I wasn't looking. Our life was predictable, comfortable, boring, perhaps by other people's standards, but I never complained about it. I thought that was exactly how a marriage should be after so many years together, without unnecessary shocks, without strong emotions that disturbed the peace, without soap opera dramas, just quiet routine and mutual companionship, until death do us part. Josephine Miller, our neighbor across the street, had lived in her house long before we arrived in the neighborhood. She was already there when we moved in more than 40 years ago. She was a 63-year-old woman, a widow for about 10 years. Her husband had died of a massive heart attack while watching a Washington Redskins football game on television. I remember that day perfectly because all the neighbors on the block got together to help her with the funeral and wake arrangements. Josephine was still an attractive woman for her age. No one could deny that. She dyed her hair a reddish-brown shade that looked a bit artificial in the sun, but it didn't look entirely bad on her. She was always well-dressed when she went out, with her nails painted red, her lips glossy, her clothes ironed and coordinated. She wasn't like me, who had barely worn makeup for years. I used to say, "What for, if nobody really saw me anymore? If I was already invisible to the world?" We had what I considered a cordial and friendly, neighborly relationship. We greeted each other on the street when we ran into each other. Sometimes we exchanged dishes when we cooked something special or made too much. Once she gave me a handwritten recipe for a 3-milk cake that came out fluffy and moist, and to this day I make it for all family birthdays. I would lend her sugar or eggs when she ran out and didn't want to go to the store. She would water my plants when we went on trips to visit Michael in Virginia Beach. That kind of normal stuff between neighbors who get along. Josephine worked part-time at a stationery shop near her house, about 4 blocks away. She started around 10 inches the morning and got out around 3 inches the afternoon. The rest of the day she spent at her house watching her television shows or tending to her front garden. She had enormous and beautiful fuchsia-colored azaleas that bloomed almost all year round and covered her entire facade. Many neighbors complimented her on how beautiful they looked. Never, not once in all those years, would it have occurred to me to suspect her. She was simply my neighbor, my acquaintance of so many years, a woman who, like me, had dedicated her entire life to her family and her home. A woman who had also grown old alone after losing her husband. Or at least that was exactly what I believed with all my innocence. The first day that Arthur got up early to supposedly exercise was a Monday, the 12th of January 2015, to be exact. I remember it perfectly because it was the same day Michael turned 41, and I had planned to call him very early to be the first to wish him a happy birthday, as I always had since he was a child. The alarm clock went off at 5 inches the morning sharp. Never before, in all our years of marriage, had we set an alarm so early. The shrill noise pulled me from a deep sleep where I was dreaming something I no longer remember. Half asleep, I thought Arthur had made a mistake setting the time. I asked him with my eyes still completely closed. What was going on? Why was the alarm clock going off at such an absurd hour? He reminded me that he had already told me he was going to start exercising in the mornings, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. I barely murmured, yes, that was fine, to be careful, and I turned over in bed to go back to sleep. I was too tired to give it much importance at that moment. I heard all the movements he made in the darkness of the bedroom, the sound of drawers opening as he looked for his workout clothes, the creak of the closet when he took out his gray sweatsuit, the one I had bought him at Walmart about 2 years ago on clearance. Then the sound of him putting on his old sneakers, those knockoff Nikes he had bought at the Sunday flea market, his steps going down the wooden stairs that creaked on certain steps, the front door opening with that squeak it always made, the door closing, and I simply fell back asleep without giving absolutely any importance to what had just happened. When I finally got up that morning, around 6:30, as was my custom, Arthur was already back home. He was standing in the kitchen, drinking a large glass of sweet tea that I had left in the refrigerator. His forehead was completely sweaty, shining under the kitchen light. The gray cotton t-shirt he was wearing was damp and stuck to his chest, outlining his figure. I asked him how the exercise had been, trying to show interest. He answered with great enthusiasm that it was great, that he had walked for about half an hour through the nearby park, that he felt renewed with energy. He looked happy. That was undeniable. His eyes even sparkled in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. And just like that, the lie begins. Charlotte sees a husband finally getting healthy. She's proud of him, but that sparkle in his eye isn't from a walk in the park. It's the thrill of a secret, and she's about to support it every single morning. How long can a lie like that last? Let's find out. I told him that was great, that I hoped he would keep it up and not get discouraged like other times he had tried to exercise. And that's how it all began, without me having the slightest suspicion. Every day after that, absolutely without fail, the alarm clock would go off at 5 inches the morning sharp. Arthur would spring out of bed, put on his sweatsuit and sneakers in a hurry, and go out into the still dark street. He always returned around 6:30, sweaty, saying that he felt wonderful, that the exercise was making him feel younger. At first, I was even pleased to see this change in him. I thought it was excellent that he was finally taking care of himself, that he was doing something good for his health. At our age, anything that helped the heart and arteries was more than welcome. Besides, I couldn't deny that I did notice physical changes in him. He was in a better mood during the day, more energetic at his job, with more desire to do things. He even started to lose a little weight, little by little. His jawline became more defined, which before had been half hidden by his double chin. The first few months passed exactly like that, like one more routine that had been added to our lives. I didn't even get up when the damn alarm went off at 5. I would barely open an eye to confirm, half asleep, that Arthur was leaving. I would hear his steps on the stairs and automatically go back to sleep until my normal time. It was his thing, his new healthy habit, and I supported him from the absolute comfort of my still warm bed. But there was something very small and almost imperceptible, that didn't quite add up for me. I couldn't explain exactly what it was, just a strange feeling in the pit of my stomach when I saw him leave so early, like that uncomfortable feeling you get when you know you left the stove on but you're not completely sure. A vague discomfort that I couldn't identify, but I completely ignored it, pushing it to the back of my mind. I told my head that I was inventing things where there were none, that I was being paranoid for no reason. In March of that same year, 2015, Emily came for lunch on a Sunday, as was her sacred custom. We were sitting, the three of us, at the dining room table, eating a hot beef stew with vegetables and flour tortillas that I had made myself that morning. The steam from the stew fogged up our glasses a bit. Emily commented, while tearing a tortilla with her hands, that her dad looked very good lately, that she had noticed he was thinner and had a better complexion. I replied with a certain maternal pride that it was because he was exercising in the mornings, that he got up at 5 every day religiously to walk in the park. Arthur smiled, satisfied with his daughter's comment, and served himself more stew, filling his bowl to the brim. Emily told him that was great, that he was so disciplined, that she wished she had the same willpower, because for her, even getting up at 7 to go to work was a huge struggle. Arthur replied with the air of a wise man that at our age there was no other option but to take good care of oneself, that one was no longer in a position to be careless, because the body no longer forgave, as it did when we were young. That seemingly trivial conversation stuck in my memory, as if it had been tattooed there, because it was the first time I really observed Arthur talking about his exercise routine with such confidence, with such conviction in every word, as if he really believed everything he was saying, as if there were no lie behind it. And maybe at that point, he himself had already become convinced of his own lie. Maybe he no longer knew how to distinguish between truth and falsehood. The entire year of 2015 passed without major incidents. Then came 2016, then 2017. The years flew by so fast, as they tend to do when you're older, and the days all become the same. And during all those years, without missing a single day, Arthur got up religiously at 5 inches the morning. There were days of torrential rain, those days in Virginia where the sky opens up and it feels like the world is going to end. I would tell him not to go out, that it was raining too hard, that he would get sick with a cold or pneumonia. But he insisted that was precisely why it was so important not to break the routine he had already established. He said that if he skipped one day, then he would skip another, and in the end, he wouldn't do anything at all, so he went out, even if it was pouring rain. There were days of unbearable heat, those terrible July days here in Virginia, where the thermometer reads 95 degrees Fahrenheit at 6 inches the morning and you feel like you're being cooked alive. The air is so hot, it even hurts to breathe. And still, Arthur went out without fail. He said the heat was even good because it made him sweat more and eliminate more toxins from his body. There were very special holidays. Christmas with the whole family gathered, New Year's with its 12 grapes and wishes, Easter with its egg hunts, his own 72nd birthday. And never, not a single day in all those 6 full years, did he break his morning routine. Not a single time. And I, like the biggest fool in the world, thought with pride what a disciplined and dedicated man I had by my side. How lucky I was to have a husband who took such good care of himself, who cared about his health. I boasted about his discipline to my friends at the market. The neighbors on the whole block also started to notice it over time. Mr. Thompson, the old man who lives on the very corner and spends all his time sweeping his piece of sidewalk as if it were his full-time job, would always shout at him with admiration when he saw him jogging in the mornings. They saw what they wanted to see, a dedicated old man taking care of his health, not a cheater. Mrs. Davis, the owner of the corner store where I shopped when I forgot something, would comment every time I went that my husband was a true example of perseverance, that her own husband wouldn't get up even if you set the bed on fire, that he spent all day lying around watching television without doing anything productive. And I would smile proudly every time I heard those comments. I felt satisfied, grateful, genuinely thinking that I had the best husband in the whole world, the most dedicated, the most responsible, the most concerned about staying healthy. Arthur started to excessively defend Josephine in any casual conversation where I mentioned her. If I made the most neutral and innocent comment about her, he would immediately jump to her defense. One day I commented without ill intent that Josephine looked very tired lately, that I had seen her with dark circles under her eyes. Arthur replied in an almost aggressive tone that, well, it was logical she was tired because she worked a lot, that not everyone could afford the luxury of being at home all day doing nothing productive. Those words hurt me deeply. They made me feel useless, invisible, as if all those years taking care of the house, raising our children, cooking his favorite meals, washing his clothes, were worth absolutely nothing. The 15th sign was in November of 2019. Tucked away in his wallet, I found a crumpled receipt from a downtown jewelry store. A receipt for $250 for a set of silver earrings with blue stones. I asked him directly what that expensive receipt was for. He explained without hesitation that they were earrings he had bought for Emily for her birthday as a special gift. But Emily's birthday is in March, and it was already November. A full 8 months had passed since her birthday, and I had never seen her wearing new silver earrings with blue stones. The 16th sign I noticed in January of 2020. Josephine started to look completely different, younger, more put together. She had done something to her face, maybe one of those expensive cosmetic treatments. She dyed her hair a more vibrant shade. She dressed in much more modern and youthful clothes than before. She wore more elaborate makeup, and always, absolutely always, when I ran into her on the street or at the market, she would look at me with that smile that seemed to scream in silence, "I know something you don't know. I have something you don't have." The 17th sign was in March of 2020, just when the terrible COVID pandemic that changed the whole world began. I thought with relief that Arthur would finally stop going out for his supposed exercise because of the mandatory lockdown and the danger of the virus, that he would have to stay home like everyone else. But no, he continued to go out religiously, every single day without exception, at the same exact time as always, as if there were no pandemic, as if there were no deadly virus circulating in the streets. I begged him not to go out anymore, that there was a very dangerous pandemic, that people were dying by the thousands. He stubbornly replied that exercise was officially permitted by the government, and besides, there was absolutely no one on the streets at that early hour, so there was no real risk. And he continued to go throughout the entire pandemic, during all those terrible months of confinement, not caring about the virus, not caring about anything other than seeing Josephine. The 18th sign appeared in July of 2020. I realized that Arthur was wearing completely new and different face masks. Handmade cloth masks with very beautiful and elaborate designs. I had made him some simple and basic white masks using scraps from an old sheet, but the ones he was wearing now were totally different. They had delicate embroidery, tiny flowers, and were in cheerful colors. I asked him with genuine curiosity where he had gotten such pretty and well-made masks. He told me that a lady in the park had sold them to him, that the poor woman was selling them to make some money during the pandemic, and so he bought several to help her out financially. I said how kind and supportive of him, but I knew the truth. I knew perfectly well that he hadn't bought those masks anywhere. They had the exact same style of embroidery that Josephine did. I had seen her many times sitting on her porch embroidering with pink and blue thread. She always made tiny little flowers with those same colors, exactly like the ones on those masks. The 19th sign came to me through Emily in October of 2020. She came for lunch on a Sunday as always, and while we were eating, she asked me if I thought her dad was okay health-wise. I asked her why she said that, what she had noticed. She explained that she didn't know exactly what it was, but that he seemed very strange lately, as if his head was completely somewhere else, in another world. That she had called him on the phone the other day to ask him something about her car and felt like he wasn't even paying real attention to what she was saying. I told her, trying to reassure her, that her dad was perfectly fine, that he was just more distracted with old age, that it was completely normal. But Emily didn't look convinced at all by my explanation. She had that look of genuine concern, and I wasn't convinced by my own empty words either. The 20th sign came on Christmas Eve of 2020. The three of us were having dinner together at the dining room table, Arthur, Emily, and I. Michael couldn't come from Virginia Beach because of all the pandemic restrictions. We were eating honey-glazed ham with collard greens, looking at the Christmas tree we had decorated together in the living room with red and gold ornaments. And Arthur's cell phone suddenly rang with a call tone. I saw him quickly pull the device out of his pants, look at the screen to see who was calling, and turn completely pale in a matter of seconds, as if he had seen a ghost. I asked him in a firm voice who was calling. He hung up without answering the call, but I saw his face clearly in that moment. I saw the absolute fear in his eyes, the pure panic, and I knew with total certainty that it was no wrong number. It was her. It was Josephine, calling him on Christmas Eve, probably complaining that he was with his legitimate family instead of being with her. All those signs together, 20 clear and compelling signs spread over 5 full years, and I had ignored absolutely all of them, one by one, systematically, because it was infinitely easier and more comfortable to believe his elaborate lies than to face the terrible truth that was right in front of my eyes. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Charlotte, how could you be so blind? 20 signs. But you see, it wasn't blindness, it was a choice. It's a terrible thing to realize that the peace you cherished for so long was just a lie you'd been telling yourself, every single day. But in January of 2021, something profound changed within me. I can't explain exactly what it was or why it happened at that specific moment. Maybe it was simply accumulated exhaustion. Maybe it was being fed up after so long. Maybe it was that finally my mind and my heart were ready to see and accept what I had been denying for years. One ordinary afternoon, while Arthur was working at the hardware store, I sat alone on the living room sofa with a steaming cup of coffee. I was looking out the window at the empty street, thinking about everything, about all the accumulated signs, about all the lies, about the 6 full years he had been getting up at 5 inches the morning religiously. 6 whole years of my life, 6 years of supposed healthy exercise, 6 years of perfectly constructed excuses. How many times had he actually gone to her house instead of the park? How many countless other times had he entered without me seeing him? Hundreds? Thousands? And then I decided with absolute clarity and determination. I was going to find out the whole truth. I was going to know exactly what was happening all those mornings, even if it hurt me to the soul, even if it destroyed me completely, even if my world fell apart. I needed to know with absolute certainty. But I couldn't just confront him directly, because if I did it without solid proof and he denied everything, as I knew he would, I would be left only with suspicions. I would be left only with torturous doubts, and I could no longer live the rest of my life carrying those suspicions and those doubts. I needed total certainty. I needed irrefutable proof. It was Emily, who, without realizing it, became my angel. She came to visit one afternoon, finding me in that fog I couldn't seem to shake. She put her hand on mine and said, "Mom, you seem gone. You're here, but you're not." I tried to wave it off, but she persisted, her eyes full of concern. "It's Dad, isn't it? I see how he is with you. I see how you look at him." I couldn't admit it, not even to her. I just mumbled something about being tired. Later, trying to fill the silence, she told me about a problem at her school, about a teacher they suspected of stealing. "It's the not knowing that's the worst part, Mom," she said, her voice soft. "Sometimes, you just need to see the truth, no matter how ugly, so you can stop driving yourself crazy." She then mentioned they used hidden security cameras to catch the thief. Her words hit me. You just need to see the truth, so you can stop driving yourself crazy. That was it. She wasn't just talking about a thief. She was giving me the key to my own prison. Cameras. Sometimes the key to freedom comes from the most unexpected place. Emily just gave her mother the one weapon she needs. But when you look for the truth, you have to be prepared to find it. The next part is intense. That specific word kept spinning in my head for the rest of the day, all through the night and into the next day. Hidden cameras. I could do exactly that. I could put secret cameras in my own house to see what my husband was really doing all those mornings, to confirm definitively if he was going out to exercise as he said, or if he was going straight to Josephine's house as I suspected. The next day, early, after Arthur left for work, I took a taxi to the city center. I didn't want Arthur to find out in any way what I was planning. I walked quickly to a large electronics store located on Grace Street, very close to the Cathedral of the Sacred Heart, a modern and spacious store, with powerful air conditioning and instrumental music in the background. A very young man attended to me kindly. He must have been 25 at most, with his impeccable red store uniform and a professional smile. He asked how he could help me that day. My hands were sweating horribly. I felt exactly like a criminal about to commit a crime. I told him with a trembling voice that I wanted to buy those cameras that you can put in houses to watch. He asked if I meant normal security cameras. I confirmed that yes, exactly those. The kind young man took me to a special aisle where there were lots of different options. Large and visible cameras, tiny and discreet cameras, cameras that looked like smoke detectors, cameras that looked like ordinary wall clocks. He asked me what I needed them for specifically, if it was to monitor the main entrance of my house. I couldn't tell him the real truth, that I needed them urgently to spy on my own husband, to monitor his movements. I lied, saying yes, it was for general security, that there had been a lot of robberies in my neighborhood lately, and I was very worried. He patiently showed me several different options, explaining the features of each one. In the end, I decided on 3 small, modern cameras, the kind that connect directly to your cell phone via Wi-Fi. They cost $120 each. In total, with a special discount the young man gave me because I told him it was for a lonely old lady, I paid $350 in full. It was absolutely all the money I had saved in secret. Money I had been saving dollar by dollar from what Arthur gave me weekly for household expenses. Dollars I had accumulated over entire years, carefully stored in an old Danish cookie tin in the darkest corner of the bedroom closet. The young man at the store was extraordinarily kind and patient with me. He explained in detail how the cameras worked. He helped me download the necessary app on my old cell phone. He showed me step by step how to view them in real time and how to review the saved recordings later. He assured me they were very easy to use, that I just had to plug them in wherever I wanted, and that was it. That from my cell phone I could see absolutely everything that was happening in my house, and that they recorded automatically 24 hours a day. I asked nervously if anyone could realize there were hidden cameras. He explained that it depended entirely on where I decided to put them, that these particular cameras were extremely tiny, that if I hid them well and strategically, absolutely no one would notice their existence. I got back home around 3 inches the afternoon. Arthur would arrive from work as usual at 6:30. I had more than enough time to install everything perfectly. I put the first camera in the main living room. I hid it carefully behind a large houseplant I have on a high shelf. From that specific angle, you could see the main entrance door perfectly and a significant part of the entire living room. I installed the second camera in the kitchen, hiding it inside a decorative ceramic jar I have on the top shelf of the pantry. From there, you could clearly see the back door that leads to the patio and the entire dining table where we eat breakfast. The third camera was, without a doubt, the most important of all. I placed it strategically in our master bedroom. I hid it very carefully behind a large picture frame we have on the nightstand next to the bed. From that exact spot, you could see the entire bedroom perfectly, including the entrance door and the large window that looks directly out onto the street, the same window from which I could clearly see Josephine's house across the way. When I finally finished installing the 3 cameras correctly, I sat on the edge of the bed and nervously opened the app on my cell phone. I could see the 3 cameras working perfectly. Everything looked incredibly sharp, clear, in absolute real time. I sat there for several long minutes looking at the illuminated screen of my cell phone, seeing my own empty bedroom on the camera, my lonely living room, my silent kitchen, and for the first time in many, many years, I felt like I finally had some control over my own life, that I was no longer completely in the dark, that I was going to know the truth, whatever the cost. That night when Arthur came home from work, tired as always, I acted as normally as possible. We had dinner together watching the news on television like every night. I served him his coffee with milk exactly as he liked it. We went to bed at the usual time, but I couldn't close my eyes for a single second. I stayed wide awake all night with the cell phone hidden under my pillow, anxiously waiting for the damn alarm clock to ring. At 5 inches the morning sharp, like a perfect Swiss watch, the alarm went off with its irritating chime. Arthur got out of bed immediately. I watched him move in the darkness of the bedroom. I opened my eyes just a tiny bit, just enough to see him without him noticing that I was awake, spying on him. He put on his gray sweatsuit, his worn-out sneakers, glanced briefly in the closet mirror, arranged his graying hair with his hands, and left the bedroom, closing the door carefully so as not to make any noise. I waited, holding my breath, for him to go all the way down the stairs. I waited to hear the unmistakable sound of the front door closing behind him. And then I pulled my cell phone out from under the pillow with trembling hands. I quickly opened the camera app with my heart pounding violently. I saw him perfectly on the illuminated screen, on the living room camera, leaving through the front door of our house. I immediately switched to the bedroom camera. From that angle, I could see partially through the window to the street. Not very well, but well enough to distinguish movement. And I saw him with absolute clarity. I saw Arthur cross the deserted pre-dawn street, walk with confident steps directly to Josephine's house, ring the doorbell with familiarity, and enter when she opened the door almost instantly. I looked at the digital clock in the corner of my cell phone. It was exactly 5:07 inches the morning. I lay there in my empty bed, staring at my cell phone screen, watching that completely empty and silent street, watching that closed house where my husband was doing God knows what. 5:20 inches the morning, 5:30, 6 o'clock. At exactly 6:43 inches the morning, I finally saw Arthur leave Josephine's house. 96 full minutes. 1 hour and 36 minutes he had been locked in there with her. 96 minutes. It wasn't a walk in the park, it was a complete betrayal, just steps from her front door. In that hour and a half, Charlotte's entire 47-year marriage evaporated. But as she'll soon discover, this is only the first layer of the lie. I saw him cross the street back towards our house, enter through the front door, and climb the stairs with heavy steps. I immediately closed the cell phone app and hid it under the pillow again. I closed my eyes tightly. I pretended I was sound asleep. Arthur entered the bedroom as always, sweaty from head to toe, with his workout shirt completely damp and stuck to his body, exactly the same as every morning for the last 6 years. He greeted me with that cheerful voice that now made me nauseous. "Good morning, Charlotte." I didn't answer him. I kept pretending to be sound asleep. I heard him go into the bathroom. I heard the sound of the shower water starting to fall, and I just lay there motionless in that bed, with my eyes tightly closed, literally feeling my entire world crumbling around me in pieces. 96 minutes. Do you have any idea how long 96 minutes is? In those 96 minutes, I went from being a happy wife to being a fool. Every good memory we ever had, every breakfast I ever made him, it all turned into a joke. That was the moment I realized I had been married to a complete stranger. 1 hour and 36 minutes straight. What was my husband doing for an hour and 36 minutes inside Josephine's house at 5 inches the morning? There was absolutely no doubt left. There were no more excuses I could invent for myself. There was no way to deny the obvious anymore. Arthur was cheating on me. With Josephine, my neighbor of so many years. For 6 full years of this specific lie. I physically felt like I couldn't breathe properly. My chest ached as if an elephant were sitting on it. The tears started to flow on their own, uncontrollably, soaking the pillowcase, but I didn't make a sound. I didn't move an inch. I just cried in the most absolute silence, waiting in torture for Arthur to finish his shower and finally leave for work, so I could completely fall apart. In that moment, it wasn't just my husband I lost. I lost my past. 47 years of memories, our wedding, the birth of our children, all of it was suddenly rewritten, tainted by this lie. I wasn't just crying for the man who walked across the street. I was grieving for the entire life I thought I had lived. Over the next few days and weeks, I religiously continued to record everything. Every day, without exception, at the same exact time, the same sickening, perfectly rehearsed ritual. 5 inches the morning. Alarm goes off. 5:07, he leaves our house. 5:08, he enters Josephine's house. 6:40 something, he leaves Josephine's house. Always exactly the same, like a mechanical clock, like a routine perfectly choreographed and rehearsed for 6 full years. I obsessively reviewed the bedroom recordings looking for any additional evidence, and I found it in abundance. In one of the nighttime recordings, I managed to clearly hear Arthur speaking in a low voice on the phone. That old, secret cell phone that I had found hidden in his drawer, I heard him say with a soft and affectionate voice, "Tomorrow at the same time, my love. I can hardly stand the tremendous urge to see you again, my love." He called Josephine, my love, with such tenderness. He didn't even call me Charlotte with affection anymore like he used to. He only spoke to me when he needed something urgent. "Charlotte, where's dinner? Charlotte, where did you leave my blue shirt? Charlotte, give me money for gas for the car." But he called her my love with all the sweetness in the world. I continued to meticulously record everything. A full week, 2 weeks, 3 whole weeks, and every morning without exception it was exactly the same. One day, at the end of the 3rd week of February, I decided to do something risky. I decided to follow him in person, with my own eyes. I wanted to see directly, without technological intermediaries, what the cameras were showing me on the cold screen. I got up with him when the alarm went off at 5. He asked, surprised, what I was doing awake at such an early hour. I lied, saying that I had woken up to go to the bathroom and couldn't get back to sleep. He said, okay, that he was going out for his walk as always, that we'd see each other later. I said yes, to be careful, not to fall. I waited patiently for him to leave the house. I mentally counted to 30 slowly and went out after him like a detective in the movies. The street was completely dark, still cold. The only sound in the distance was the neighborhood dogs barking for no apparent reason. I hid, crouching behind a large car parked on the sidewalk, and watched him. I saw Arthur cross the street unhurriedly, ring Josephine's doorbell with confidence, and enter when she opened it almost immediately. I approached very slowly with silent steps, sticking close to the walls of the neighboring houses so as not to be seen. I got to where I was right next to the main window of Josephine's living room. There was a thin lace curtain, but it was ajar by a few inches, enough to see something of the lit interior. And what I saw with my own eyes broke my heart into a billion irreparable pieces. Seeing the proof on a screen is devastating, but seeing it with your own eyes, hiding in the dark while your husband kisses the neighbor, that's a pain that demands action. This is no longer just about sadness, it's about rage. I saw Arthur and Josephine intimately embraced in the middle of the living room, kissing passionately with a physical familiarity that only comes after years and years of intimacy. It wasn't the clumsy kiss of a new adventure. It wasn't a kiss between people who are just getting to know each other. It was the deep kiss of an established couple, of people who know each other perfectly, who truly love each other. I saw Josephine slowly take off my husband's workout shirt. I saw Arthur stroke her dyed hair with infinite tenderness. They laughed together. They whispered things in each other's ears that I couldn't hear. They looked into each other's eyes with genuine love, and then they walked, embraced, towards what I assumed was Josephine's bedroom. And I couldn't see anything more because they disappeared from my sight. I returned to my house walking like a zombie. I went in, locked the door, and literally threw myself onto the living room sofa to cry like I had never cried in my entire life. I cried with deep sobs that came from the very bottom of my soul. I cried for the 47 years of marriage that I thought we had. I cried for all the mornings I stayed peacefully in bed, naively believing that my husband was taking care of his health. I cried for my terrible naivety, for my monumental stupidity, for having been so absolutely blind for so long. But above all, I cried with pure rage, a burning rage that I had never before felt in my entire existence. A rage that burned in my gut, a rage that made me want to scream until I lost my voice. How dare he, Arthur? How dare he blatantly cheat on me for all these years? How dare he kiss and touch Josephine while I waited faithfully at home for him with his hot breakfast ready? How dare he caress her while he didn't even look at me anymore? And Josephine, that Josephine, my neighbor of so many years, the woman to whom I had lent sugar when she ran out, to whom I gave freshly made tamales every Christmas, the one who greeted me on the street with that completely fake smile. Both of them had betrayed me in the worst possible way. They had both made me the fool of the neighborhood for years, but no more. I was no longer going to be the idiotic wife who stays quiet and submissive, the one who pretends not to see anything, the one who endures everything in silence to keep the family together. No, I was going to do something decisive, something that would make them pay dearly, something that would make them feel even a tiny part of the unbearable pain I was feeling at that moment. But I had to be very smart about it. I couldn't just confront him directly and be done with it, because he would deny absolutely everything. He would say that I was completely crazy, that I was making things up out of the jealousy of a bitter old woman. I needed solid proof, conclusive proof that he couldn't deny under any circumstances, proof that the entire family could see, that all our acquaintances could see. I wanted Arthur to feel the terrible humiliation that I was feeling. I wanted Josephine to know that she wasn't going to get away with it so easily. I wanted absolutely everyone to know what kind of man my husband really was, and what kind of woman my supposed neighbor friend was. Over the following weeks, I dedicated myself completely to gathering all possible evidence with obsessive meticulousness. I carefully saved the camera recordings onto a new USB drive. 3 full weeks of irrefutable evidence. 21 consecutive days of Arthur entering Josephine's house at 5 inches the morning and leaving an hour and a half later. Everything perfectly dated and with the exact time. I also started taking additional photos with my cell phone from my bedroom window. Photos of Arthur entering that house. Photos of him leaving. Photos with the date and time visible. One day I found that old cell phone again, the one he kept hidden among his rolled-up socks. I went through it much more thoroughly this time, without fear. I found hundreds and hundreds of text messages. Messages that went back many years. Complete conversations filled with love and passion. I can't stop thinking about you for a second. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life. I wish we could be together all the time without hiding. I love you, Josephine. I love you like I've never loved anyone in this world. That last message, in particular, was like a dagger straight to the heart. You know, being cheated on is bad enough, but reading that one line, that was worse. It meant that my 47 years, my love, my devotion, it all meant less. It meant that even when we were young, I was never his greatest love. That pain is deeper than betrayal. It's an erasure of my entire being. I love you like I've never loved anyone. Like he never loved me. Not even when we were young sweethearts full of illusions. Not even when we got married with so much enthusiasm. Not even when our 2 children were born. I took photos of all those messages with trembling hands, one by one, hundreds of photos, until I couldn't continue because the tears blurred my vision of the phone screen. I also found photos saved on that secret phone. Tons of photos of Josephine. Photos that Arthur had obviously taken of her personally. Photos of her in provocative lingerie. Photos of her smiling coquettishly at the camera. Photos of the 2 of them together, intimately embracing in what was clearly her bedroom. I felt a deep disgust. I had an uncontrollable urge to vomit everything in my stomach, but I saved them all, every single one, because I was going to need them as evidence. One day, while digging much deeper through all of Arthur's drawers, I found something additional that froze my blood. A manila envelope. An envelope with cash, $500 in $20 bills. And there was a handwritten note, written in Josephine's cursive. I knew her handwriting perfectly because we had exchanged handwritten recipes. The note said, verbatim, "For the kids' school expenses. Thanks for everything. Always, my love. J. School expenses." What? School expenses. What children was she talking about? And then I realized something I had vaguely heard. Josephine had children living with her. I knew that, but I always thought they were grown up, that they no longer lived in her house. But that specific note clearly spoke of school expenses. Could Josephine still have school-aged children? And why would Arthur be paying for those expenses? I began to investigate discreetly. I casually asked Mrs. Davis from the corner store, who knew absolutely everything that happened in the neighborhood. I asked, feigning simple curiosity, if she knew if Josephine had young children living with her in her house. She said they belonged to her daughter, the one who went to the West Coast years ago seeking a better life, and that she had left them with Josephine for her to raise while she earned money over there. She said, poor Josephine, that she was still too young to be raising grandchildren, but what else could she do but take care of them? I thanked her for the information and left, pensive. Her daughter's children. That was what everyone believed, but something didn't add up at all. Something in that written note. Thanks for everything. Always, my love. Why would Josephine thank Arthur so effusively for paying for her grandchildren's school expenses? What relationship did he have with those children? Unless… No, it couldn't be that. Please, God, let it not be what my mind was beginning to imagine. But the horrible doubt got deep into my head, and I couldn't get it out no matter how hard I tried. I needed to know much more. One day, when Josephine left early for her job at the stationery shop, I took the opportunity. I crossed the street with my heart pounding violently. I rang her doorbell with determination. A young boy opened it, tall, thin, with light brown skin. He must have been about 12, as I had been told. I asked if his grandmother was home. He said no. She had gone to work as usual. I said what a shame, that I had brought him some flour tortillas that I had left over from breakfast. I asked him his name. He said it was Ethan. I introduced myself as Charlotte, the neighbor from the house across the street. The boy looked at me with those large, expressive, dark brown eyes that seemed strangely familiar, terribly familiar. I gave him the tortillas wrapped in a napkin and quickly returned to my house before he noticed my nervousness. But I kept thinking obsessively about that boy, Ethan. Something about him was unsettlingly familiar. His particular way of speaking, his hand gestures, the specific way he tilted his head when he listened. Arthur made the exact same gestures, had the exact same posture. I wasn't being completely paranoid. I was seeing things where there were none, but the doubt grew inside me, like a malignant tumor, like a slow poison. A few days later, I saw the boy again. He was outside his house, carefully washing an old, beat-up car. Next to him was a younger girl, about 10 years old. She had long, dark hair and the same large, expressive eyes as the boy. I watched them closely from my living room window, and something about the girl powerfully caught my attention. Her nose was exactly the same nose that Emily had when she was a little girl. That characteristic little upturned nose with the tip slightly pointing upwards. My heart began to beat uncontrollably fast. It couldn't be possible. Please, merciful God, let it not be what I was thinking. It's that horrible, sinking feeling when the pieces click into place. It's not just a suspicion. It's a biological fact staring her in the face. Her husband doesn't just have a mistress, he has a whole other family. But I needed to know with absolute certainty. That afternoon, when Arthur came home tired from work, I watched him much more carefully than ever before. His facial features, the way he moved and walked, his particular way of laughing, and then I saw it with terrifying clarity. Ethan had the exact same eyes as Arthur, the same elongated face shape, the same long, thin hands with fine fingers, and the girl, Mia, as I later found out her name was, had the same unmistakable smile, that slightly crooked smile to the left that Arthur had when he was young in the old photos and that Emily later inherited. No. But I could no longer deny it to myself. Those children were not Josephine's grandchildren at all. Those children were Arthur's biological children. My legs literally stopped responding. I had to sit down immediately on the sofa before I fainted and fell to the floor. Arthur hadn't just been cruelly deceiving me for 12 years. Arthur had other secret children, children I knew nothing about, children he had with Josephine while he was still married to me, and he was supporting them financially. That's why he constantly gave her money. That's why he went religiously every morning, not just for Josephine, but for them too, for his other complete family. I felt like I was physically dying. Seriously, I felt my heart stop dead in my chest. 47 years of marriage, 2 children raised together, an entire life shared. And he secretly had another parallel family just 10 feet away, across the street, right under my nose. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This was a different life. He had breakfast with them. He helped them with their homework. He was a father, all while still living with me. The deception was so layered, so cruel, I didn't even know where to begin my anger. I didn't just lose my husband. I lost my own reality, and I had never noticed anything. Or maybe I had. Maybe I always knew on some deep level. But I didn't want to see it consciously, because seeing and accepting it meant recognizing that my marriage was a gigantic lie, that my whole life was a lie, that everything was a lie built over decades. The tears no longer came. I had cried so much for so many days that I literally had no more tears left to shed. What I felt now was something completely different. It was an explosive mixture of pain and rage so intense that it made me tremble from head to toe. Arthur had vilely stolen 12 years of my life, 12 full years in which he could have been honest with me. How much money must he have given Josephine all these years? How many thousands and thousands of dollars? Money that should have been for our legitimate family, for our children, for me, and Josephine, that unscrupulous woman, knowing perfectly well that Arthur was married to me, living right next door to his legitimate wife, seeing me every day on the street, greeting me with that completely fake and mocking smile. How could they do something like that? How could they sleep peacefully at night? How could they look at themselves in the mirror every morning without feeling shame? But enough crying and lamenting. I was no longer going to be the pathetic victim. I was no longer going to be the fool who stays quiet, enduring everything. I was going to make them both pay dearly, Arthur and Josephine. I was going to publicly expose their horrible lie in front of the entire family, in front of all the neighborhood residents, in front of everyone who knew us. I wanted them to feel the deep humiliation that I was feeling. I wanted them to carry the terrible shame they had made me carry unknowingly for all these years. After confirming with absolute certainty that those children were Arthur's biological children, I spent several days locked in my bedroom, convincingly pretending I was sick with the flu. Arthur would ask with false concern if I was okay, if I needed him to bring medicine. I would answer without looking him in the eye that yes, it was just a bad cold, that it would pass on its own with rest. Because if I looked him directly in the face, I would explode. I would scream at him absolutely everything I knew, and it wasn't the right time yet. Still, I needed to be 100% sure of everything. One afternoon, while Arthur was working at the hardware store and Josephine at the stationery shop, I crossed the street to her house again. I rang the doorbell with determination. It opened again. I told him I needed to talk to him about something very important. The boy looked at me, surprised and nervous. He asked me what exactly I wanted to talk about. I told him I needed to know the truth. If Josephine was really his grandmother, as everyone said. The boy turned completely pale. He was silent for several agonizing seconds. I told him in a soft but firm voice that I believed she wasn't his grandmother at all, that I believed Josephine was his real mother. Ethan swallowed hard. His eyes filled with tears. He begged me please not to tell anyone, that his mom had told him that if anyone found out the truth, the authorities would come and separate them, that they would take them from her custody. I asked who exactly would take them. He said with a trembling voice that the government, that his mom had explained that they were still very young and she was too old to be a mother to teenage children, that if anyone found out, they would be sent to a horrible orphanage. So that was the cruel lie that Josephine had put into the heads of those innocent children, that if anyone discovered the truth, they would be separated and sent to an orphanage. I asked him directly who his father was, if he knew who it was. Ethan remained completely silent, but his eyes automatically drifted towards the window, towards my house across the street. I asked him gently if he knew him. If he knew who his father was. The boy nodded slowly. Tears streamed freely down his young cheeks. He told me in a barely audible whisper that, yes, it was the gentleman from across the street, my husband. I know you might find it strange. Why would a child confess to me? The very person he was taught was the evil, sick old woman. But when I looked into Ethan's eyes, I didn't see fear. I saw a child who was just tired. So tired of holding a secret that was too big for him. He was just waiting for someone, anyone, to come and finally give him permission to tell the truth. Hearing those words come out of that boy's mouth was like receiving a brutal slap with full force. I asked if Arthur knew that Ethan was his son. He said yes, that he came to see them every morning without fail, that he had breakfast with them, that he helped them with difficult school homework, that he gave them money for school expenses and clothes. I asked if his sister Mia was also Arthur's daughter. He confirmed that yes, Mia was also Mr. Arthur's daughter. Mr. Arthur, That's what they called my husband, as if he were just a kind neighbor, as if he weren't their biological father. I asked when exactly they were born. He told me he was born in 2009, Mia in 2011. 2009, 2011. I did the quick math in my head. In 2009, I was 55 years old. Arthur was 63. Josephine was 57. It was rare, but Josephine could still have biological children at that age, and she had them with my husband while he was still married to me. I asked him how long Arthur had been visiting them. He said for as long as he could remember, that he had always come every day of his life, early in the morning before going to work at the hardware store, every single day without exception. It wasn't 6 years of infidelity as I had thought. It was 12 full years, 12 damned years of lies. I know you might be confused. Why did I say 6 years at first and now 12? 6 years. That was how long he used the exercise excuse to openly go to her every morning. But 12 years, that's how long it had been since the first child was born. It turns out that 6-year charade was just a way to normalize a lie that had already been going on for so much longer. Before that, he must have been sneaking over at different times, lying about working late or going to the store. The 5 a.m. walk was just him getting arrogant, creating a perfect, unbreakable routine right in front of my face. 6 years of lies was devastating enough, but 12 years of a fully formed double life? And the worst part? They painted Charlotte as the villain, the sick old woman. Her pain is now turning into cold, hard resolve. Don't go anywhere. You need to hear what she does next. I know you might be confused. Why did I say 6 years at first and now 12? 6 years. That was how long he used the exercise excuse to openly go to her every morning. But 12 years. That's how long it had been since the first child was born. It turns out that 6-year charade was just a way to normalize a lie that had already been going on for so much longer. I asked if Arthur had ever openly told them they were his children, if he had ever introduced them to their older siblings. Ethan sadly shook his head. He explained that his mom always told them they couldn't tell anyone the truth, that it was a secret they had to keep forever, that if Arthur's wife found out, she would get very angry and would do a lot of harm to them. I was going to harm them. That's how Josephine and Arthur painted me to those innocent children, as the evil witch from the fairy tales who would harm them if she discovered their existence. I asked Ethan if he knew who I really was. The boy looked at me with his eyes full of fear and tears. He said yes, he knew, that I was his dad's legitimate wife. I asked him how he felt about the whole complicated situation. Ethan burst into inconsolable tears. A deep, desperate cry. The cry of a child completely confused and frightened by a situation he hadn't asked for. He told me between sobs that he didn't know how to feel, that sometimes he wished his dad lived with them for real, that he was like the normal dads of his friends from school, that he would take him to play soccer on Sundays in the park, that he would go to parent-teacher conferences when he was summoned, that he would proudly introduce him as his son to the world, but that his mom always told him that could never be, that they had to be content with seeing him for just an hour in the mornings and nothing more. My heart broke at that moment, not for me, but for that innocent child. That child who was absolutely not to blame for anything. That child who was a victim of the lies and selfish decisions of his parents, just like me. I asked if Mia also knew the whole truth. He said yes, she knew, but she was still younger and didn't fully understand all the implications, that sometimes she would innocently ask why her dad didn't live with them like a normal family, and that her mom, Josephine, would make up that it was because Arthur had to take care of another lady who was very old and very sick and needed him. That old and sick lady was supposedly me. I got up from Josephine's living room sofa. I couldn't stay there a second longer. I couldn't hear any more without going completely crazy. I told Ethan thank you very much for speaking with me honestly, not to worry, that I wasn't going to do any harm to him or his sister Mia, that they were not to blame at all for this horrible situation. I left that house feeling like I was floating outside my body, as if I were in a surreal dream or a terrible nightmare from which I couldn't wake up, no matter how hard I tried, 12 years of betrayal. 2 secret children living 10 feet away. A double life perfectly orchestrated and maintained for over a decade. Arthur had been an active father to these children all this time. He had watched them grow from babies. He had helped them with their first elementary school homework. He had eaten breakfast with them thousands of mornings, while I, his legitimate wife of 40-something years, waited innocently at home without knowing anything at all. It was no longer just sexual infidelity. It was something infinitely worse. It was betrayal in every possible sense. It was an entire life based on stratified lies. It was the cruelest deception that could exist. That night, when Arthur came home from work, as always, I saw him completely differently. I no longer saw the man I had married in love 47 years ago. I no longer saw the loving father of my children, Michael and Emily. I no longer saw my life partner. I saw an absolute stranger, a professional liar, a man capable of maintaining 2 complete families without his voice trembling, capable of kissing his secret children in the morning and coming to have dinner peacefully with me at night as if nothing was wrong. He asked me what was for dinner as he took off his shoes at the entrance. I answered with a completely monotonous voice that there were refried beans and cheese quesadillas. We ate in a heavy, uncomfortable silence. I could barely eat anything. Every bite got painfully stuck in my throat. He asked if I was still sick with the flu. I said yes, that I still felt quite bad. He suggested I should go to the doctor if I didn't get better soon. I said yes, maybe I would. After dinner, he went straight to bed as always. I stayed sitting in the dark living room with the television on, but not really watching it or processing anything. I was thinking deeply, meticulously planning every detail, because I already knew exactly what I was going to do. I had it all absolutely clear in my head. I wasn't going to confront him in private. I wasn't going to give him the opportunity to cry with regret, to beg for forgiveness on his knees, to promise me he would change and leave Josephine, because it was too late for all that. 12 years too late. I was going to expose him publicly, in front of the entire gathered family, in front of our children, Michael and Emily, in front of all the neighbors in the neighborhood, in front of everyone who had known us for decades. I wanted Michael and Emily to know with proof what kind of father they really had. I wanted them to see with their own eyes their father's horrible betrayal, and I wanted Arthur to feel the deep shame, to carry it for the rest of his miserable life, to know that absolutely everyone knew what kind of man he really was. But I needed the perfect moment, the perfect occasion for maximum impact. And then I remembered something important. In exactly 2 weeks, it was Arthur's 75th birthday. Michael had already confirmed that he would come from Virginia Beach with his wife Jessica and my grandchildren Caleb and Sophia. Emily had said she would arrive early to help me prepare all the food as we always did. It was a family tradition that on Arthur's birthdays, we would have a big barbecue in the backyard of the house. We would invite the neighbors from the block, old family friends, and all the extended family. This year was going to be completely different. This year was going to be the birthday that Arthur would never forget for the rest of his life. For the next 2 weeks, I dedicated myself to preparing absolutely everything with obsessive meticulousness. First, I organized all the evidence I had collected. I carefully transferred the complete camera recordings to 3 different DVDs. 3 DVDs with every morning I had recorded. Arthur entering Josephine's house. Arthur leaving an hour and a half later, over and over again, for entire weeks, all perfectly dated. I printed all the photos of the messages from the secret phone on good quality photo paper. There were exactly 52 full pages, messages of passionate love, explicit messages, intimate photos of Josephine, everything. I also printed the photos I had taken personally from my window. Photos with the date and time perfectly visible, completely irrefutable evidence. But something crucial was missing, something absolutely important. I needed official scientific proof that Ethan and Mia were Arthur's biological children. So I did something I never thought I would do in my life, something that was perhaps morally wrong, but that I desperately needed to do. One morning, while Arthur was working at the hardware store, I stealthily entered his bedroom. I searched through all his dirty clothes in the hamper. I found an old toothbrush he had left discarded in the bathroom trash can. It had several hairs stuck to it, hairs with the root from Arthur. I carefully saved them in a small plastic Ziploc bag. Then I waited patiently for Ethan to leave his house. I approached him on the street as he was walking. I told him I needed him to do me a very important favor. The boy looked at me, scared and confused. I explained that I needed one of his hairs with the root and one from his sister Mia. He also asked me what exactly I needed them for. I explained that it was for a scientific test, a DNA test that would officially prove that they were Arthur's biological children. He said, but they already knew perfectly well that they were his children, so why did I need a test? I explained that I needed an official, scientific test, a test that absolutely no one could deny under any circumstances. Ethan hesitated for several seconds, but finally agreed to help me. He carefully pulled a hair from his head. He handed it to me. I asked about Mia's hair. He said she was at school at that moment, but that he would bring me one that night without fail. I thanked him enormously for his help. That afternoon, Ethan knocked discreetly on my door. He handed me another hair from Mia. The next day, early in the morning, I took a taxi to a private clinical analysis laboratory, one of those large labs that do confidential paternity tests. I told the young lady at the counter that I urgently needed a paternity DNA test. She asked if it was for an official legal proceeding or just for personal information. I told her it was just for personal information. She informed me that it was $350 for the complete test, that the results would take about a week to be ready. I paid the full amount in cash, handed over the 3 labeled hair samples, and waited anxiously. Meanwhile, I continued with the birthday preparations, as if nothing were wrong. I told Arthur enthusiastically that I was going to throw a really big party for his 75th birthday, that I was going to invite all the neighbors from the neighborhood, all the acquaintances from over the years. He asked me why all the expense and fuss, since he was too old for big parties. I insisted that, no, you don't turn 75 every day, that we were going to celebrate in a big way as he deserved. Arthur smiled, satisfied. That smile that once seemed beautiful and tender to me, and now made me sick to my stomach, he said, "Well, if you want to have a party, then go ahead. You know more about those organizational things." I had formal printed invitations made, elegant invitations on special glossy paper. They read, verbatim, "We cordially invite you to celebrate the 75 years of life of Arthur Foster. Saturday, March 20th, 2 p.m. There will be food, drinks, and very special surprises." I personally distributed all the invitations to every neighbor on the block, to all our close friends, to all the extended family, and of course, I also gave a special invitation to Josephine. She told me with that completely false smile how kind I was, that of course she would attend with pleasure. I told her that was perfect, that I really wanted her to be there, that it was going to be a truly special and unforgettable celebration. Josephine had no idea how special that party was really going to be. A week before the birthday, I went back to the lab to pick up the DNA test results. The young lady at the counter handed me a sealed white envelope. I thanked her and left. I didn't open it right there in the lab. I waited patiently until I got home. I locked myself in the bedroom and opened it with violently trembling hands. The official document stated in very clear letters, probability of paternity, 99.99%. 99.99%. That isn't just a confirmation, it's the final nail in the coffin. Charlotte now holds the one piece of paper that can destroy Arthur's entire world, and she has the perfect party planned to use it. You do not want to miss this birthday party. There it was, the definitive scientific proof. Arthur was the confirmed biological father of Ethan and Mia. There was absolutely no doubt left. No way to deny anything. I carefully saved the official document with the rest of all the accumulated evidence. The days leading up to the birthday passed very slowly. Arthur was strangely happy, excited for his big party, to see his children, to celebrate with the whole family. He didn't have the slightest idea of the nuclear bomb that was about to be dropped on him. Michael arrived on Friday night with his wife Jessica and my beloved grandchildren Caleb and Sophia. The children ran excitedly to hug me as soon as they entered the house, shouting excitedly, calling me Grandma. I hugged them tightly. thinking sadly that maybe after tomorrow they wouldn't want to see me ever again, thinking that maybe they would hate me for what I was about to do. But I had to do it for myself, for my trampled dignity, for all those years of accumulated lies. Saturday dawned sunny and beautiful. A perfect day for a party, or for a monumental disaster, depending on how you look at it. Emily arrived very early to help me prepare all the food. As always, we made marinated grilled steak, ranch-style beans with beer, fresh guacamole, spicy pico de gallo, and huge handmade flour tortillas. Emily told me, while she was chopping cilantro, that she had noticed I was very strange lately. I asked her, strange in what way specifically? She said she couldn't explain it well, but that I seemed tense, as if worried about something serious. I told her I was perfectly fine, that it was just the normal stress of organizing such a big party. Emily looked at me intently as if she didn't quite believe me, but she didn't say anything more about it. At 2 inches the afternoon sharp, the first guests began to arrive. The neighbors from the whole block, friends from decades ago, acquaintances from the hardware store where Arthur worked. The house quickly filled with people, with laughter, with country music in the background. Arthur was in his absolute element, greeting everyone effusively, receiving congratulations, telling his usual bad jokes. At 3 inches the afternoon, Josephine arrived alone. She didn't even bring Ethan and Mia with her. I suppose she didn't want to draw any unnecessary attention. She arrived with a gift wrapped in shiny gold paper, and that completely false smile that I knew so well. She gave Arthur a kiss on the cheek, congratulating him on his 75 years. I saw clearly how my husband's eyes lit up when he saw her arrive. I saw how he discreetly touched her hand with affection, and I felt the rage burn inside me like boiling lava, but I held it in. I smiled. I played my role as the perfect wife a little longer. At 4 inches the afternoon, when everyone was calmly eating and drinking beer, I asked for everyone's attention by tapping a spoon against a glass. I shouted, "Family, friends, neighbors, thank you so much for coming to celebrate Arthur's 75th birthday." Everyone applauded happily. Arthur was beaming with pride. I said that, as everyone knew, Arthur and I had been married for 47 years. 47 years sharing absolutely everything in life, the joys, the sorrows, everything together. More emotional applause. I said that to celebrate these years together, I had prepared a very special surprise. A video with photos of our entire life, of our children, of our family. Arthur looked at me, surprised and emotional. He told me I shouldn't have gone to so much trouble. I told him it was no trouble at all, that I really wanted to do something truly special for him. Michael helped me connect the laptop to the large television we had set up on the patio. I told everyone to get comfortable, that this was going to take a little while. Everyone settled in, expectant. Some sat in chairs, others stood with their plates of food. Arthur was sitting in the front row, smiling, relaxed, expecting to see photos of our old wedding, of when the children were little, of happy family vacations. But that was not at all what they were going to see. I pressed the play button with a steady hand. The big screen went black. Then huge white letters appeared. The whole truth about Arthur Foster. The crowd fell silent, confused, murmuring among themselves. Arthur frowned, worried. He asked me what this was exactly. I didn't answer him, just kept staring at the screen. And then the video I had edited began. First, the security camera recordings appeared. Arthur leaving our house at 5 inches the morning. Arthur crossing the empty street. Arthur ringing Josephine's doorbell. Arthur entering her house. The date and time were clearly visible in the bottom corner of the screen. 5:07 a.m. the 15th of February 2021. 5:08 a.m. the 16th of February 2021. 5:07 a.m. the 17th of February 2021. One day after another, 1 week after another, relentlessly. I heard the surprised murmurs from everyone, the gasps of shock. Someone asked what the hell this was. Arthur had stood up, completely pale. He was trembling. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. He yelled at me to turn it off immediately. I told him in a firm voice, "No, sit down. The best is yet to come." Emily had also stood up, her face a mask of total shock. Michael's mouth was wide open in astonishment. Jessica was protectively hugging the children. The video continued, showing more evidence. Now the printed photos of the love messages appeared, the intimate photos of Josephine. The phrase, "I love you like I've never loved anyone," appeared in giant letters on the screen. I clearly heard someone crying. It was Emily. Josephine had gotten up from her chair. She was desperately trying to leave, but people were literally blocking her way. Everyone was looking at her with absolute contempt. I said in a loud, clear voice, "Don't go. The best part is still to come." The video continued relentlessly. Now the photos of Ethan and Mia appeared. Photos I had taken discreetly. Photos where the physical resemblance to Arthur was crystal clear. And then photos of Michael and Emily when they were little appeared right next to the photos of Ethan and Mia. The family resemblance was absolutely undeniable, I said in a loud voice, pointing at the photos. These two children, Ethan, age 12, and Mia, age 10, are Arthur's secret children, the children he had with Josephine while he was married to me all these years. The silence was completely sepulchral. No one moved. No one even breathed. Arthur fell to his knees on the ground. He began to beg me to please stop. I screamed at him to shut his mouth, to shut up once and for all, that after 47 years of marriage, this is how he repaid all my faithfulness. Tears streamed freely down my cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of pure rage, of relief, of absolute liberation. I screamed that for 6 full years I thought he was getting up to exercise. 6 years believing all his lies, and it turned out he had another whole family, other secret children. Michael approached his father, who was lying on the floor. His face showed absolute disgust and disappointment. He asked him directly if it was true, if he really had other secret children. Arthur couldn't speak. He just cried inconsolably on the floor. Emily ran towards me, hugged me tightly, and told me through tears that she was so sorry, that she had no idea about any of it. And then the last part of the video appeared on the screen. The official result of the DNA test. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. I said with a trembling but firm voice. In case anyone still has any doubts, there is the official scientific proof. Arthur Foster is the confirmed biological father of Ethan and Mia Miller. People started shouting furiously, insulting Arthur, insulting Josephine. They yelled, "Shameless, disgraceful, how could you do this?" Josephine was crying hysterically. She tried to defend herself, yelling that she loved him, that she had always loved him, that it wasn't her fault he was married when they fell in love. I yelled back that of course it was her fault, that she knew perfectly well he was married, that she knew he lived with me, and yet she slept with him for years. She had children with him. She made me look like the fool of the neighborhood for years. Mr. Thompson, the neighbor from the corner, grabbed Arthur firmly by the arm, lifting him from the floor. He told him how he could have done something like that Charlotte was a good and decent woman, how he could have betrayed her in such a horrible way. Arthur didn't answer, just cried and cried without stopping. Mrs. Davis from the corner store went directly up to Josephine, furious. She yelled that she was a tramp, a shameless husband stealer, that she would stop serving her at her store, that she didn't want her dirty money. The party turned into total chaos. People yelling everywhere, people crying, people leaving indignant and offended. I just stood there in the middle of it all, watching everything fall apart, watching Arthur receive the scorn and rejection of everyone who knew him, watching Josephine be publicly pointed out as the mistress, the homewrecker, and I felt liberated, completely liberated. I had finally told the truth. Finally, everyone knew. It wasn't about saving the marriage. It was about saving herself. In the middle of all that chaos and screaming, Charlotte finally found peace. The lie is broken. But what happens after the bomb goes off? The story isn't over. Finally, I didn't have to carry that unbearable weight alone. The days immediately following the party were a complete whirlwind. The news spread through the entire neighborhood like wildfire. In a matter of hours, absolutely everyone in the fan district knew what had happened. The gossipy neighbors made sure that not a single detail went untold. Arthur stayed at the house that night, but he slept on the living room sofa. He didn't dare come up to our bedroom. I locked the door anyway. I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to hear him. I wanted nothing from him. The next day, very early, before the sun came up, I heard him gathering some of his things. He was putting clothes into an old suitcase, taking his personal items from the bathroom. When I went down to the kitchen around 7 inches the morning, he was already gone. He didn't leave me a note. He didn't tell me where he was going. He had simply disappeared like a coward. Later, I found out through the gossipy neighbors that he had moved directly into Josephine's house, that he was now living openly with her and his secret children, that he wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. Emily came to stay with me that first week. She didn't want to leave me alone. She made me coffee in the mornings. She made me eat, even though I had no appetite. She would sit with me in the afternoons, watching television in silence. One night, while we were drinking chamomile tea in the living room, she asked me how I really felt. I told her with complete honesty that I didn't know how to feel, that it was a strange mix of pain, rage, relief, and freedom all at once. That on one hand, it hurt to have wasted so many years of my life with a man who never valued me, but on the other hand, I felt relieved to finally know the truth. Emily hugged me, crying. She told me that she couldn't believe her father could have done something like that either, that she felt betrayed too, that she had always seen him as a good man, a good father, and now she didn't know what to think of him. I told her that he was still her biological father, that would never change, but that he was also a liar who had lived a double life for 12 years, that both things could be true at the same time. Michael called me on the phone from Virginia Beach. He was emotionally devastated. He told me he couldn't believe what he had seen, that he had cried all night, that Jessica was also in shock. He asked me what I was going to do now, if I was going to get a divorce. I told him I didn't know yet, that I needed time to think, to process everything, to decide what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. Michael told me that whatever I decided, he would support me completely, that he and Emily were on my side no matter what, that Arthur was the one who had destroyed the family, not me. Those words gave me a lot of strength. Knowing that my children supported me unconditionally meant everything to me. During those first weeks, Arthur tried to contact me several times. He sent me text messages from his cell phone, called me at all hours, knocked on the door of the house begging me to let him in to talk. I never answered him, never opened the door. I had absolutely nothing to say to him. One day, he left a long letter under the door, a handwritten letter on several pages. I read it only once, and tore it into pieces. In the letter, he said he was very sorry, that he never wanted to hurt me, that things just happened, that he had fallen in love with Josephine without looking for it, that when Ethan and Mia were born, he felt he couldn't abandon them, that he felt obligated to take care of them, that he had tried to keep both families happy, that he knew he had failed miserably, that he asked for my forgiveness, even though he knew he didn't deserve it. Pure excuses, pure cheap justifications. Not once in the entire letter did he take real responsibility for his decisions. It was always that things happened, that he felt obligated, that he tried to do better. He never admitted that he was simply selfish, that he consciously lied to me for 12 years, that he deliberately chose to keep me in the dark. The rage I felt reading that pathetic letter was immense, but it was also the final nail in the coffin. I decided at that exact moment that I was going to get a divorce, that I didn't want to spend another day of my life legally tied to that man. I hired a lawyer, a young and feisty woman that Emily recommended. Her name was Miss Anderson. She was about 35 years old and specialized in complicated divorces. I told her the whole story. I showed her all the evidence, the videos, the photos, the messages, the DNA test. Miss Anderson whistled, impressed. She told me I had an absolutely solid case, that with all that evidence, I could ask for whatever I wanted in the divorce. I told her I only wanted 3 things. First, the final divorce. Second, for him to leave me the house because it was as much mine as it was his. Third, a fair alimony, considering I had been a housewife for 47 years and no longer had a way to work at my age. Miss Anderson smiled. She told me that all of that was more than reasonable, that any judge would grant it to me without a problem, given the proven adultery. We started the divorce proceedings immediately. Arthur was officially notified by a process server who arrived at Josephine's house. At first, he tried to fight it. He hired his own lawyer. He said the house belonged to both of us, and he deserved half, that he wasn't going to pay any alimony because I could also work. But when his lawyer saw all the evidence we had, he advised him to accept my terms, that if we went to trial, he would be publicly destroyed, that I could also sue him for emotional distress, that it was best to reach a quick agreement. Arthur finally agreed. He signed all the papers his lawyer put in front of him. I would get the house completely in my name. He would pay me alimony of $1,500 a month for the rest of my life or until I remarried, which was obviously never going to happen. He would also give me a one-time payment of $50,000 as compensation for emotional distress. The divorce was finalized in August of 2021, just 5 months after the disastrous party. 47 years of marriage. Officially ended with a signature on a piece of paper. The day we signed the final documents at the courthouse, I saw Arthur for the first time since the party. He looked terrible. He had aged 10 years in 5 months. He had deep, dark circles under his eyes. He had lost a lot of weight. His hair had turned completely white. He looked at me with those sad eyes and asked if I could ever forgive him. I told him in a firm voice that I didn't know, that maybe with time the pain would lessen, but that to forgive him completely, probably never. That what he had done to me was unforgivable. Seeing him there, looking 10 years older, his hair completely white, I should have felt satisfied, or at least some pity, but I felt nothing. Forgiveness is a luxury I couldn't give, and he didn't deserve to receive. Signing that paper, that wasn't revenge. That was me, saving what was left of my own life. Seeing him there, looking 10 years older, his hair completely white. I should have felt satisfied, or at least some pity, but I felt nothing. Forgiveness is a luxury I couldn't give, and he didn't deserve to receive. Signing that paper, that wasn't revenge. That was me, saving what was left of my own life. Arthur nodded, defeated. He said nothing more. He signed the papers and left. Meanwhile, my relationship with Josephine was obviously completely destroyed. We didn't even greet each other on the street anymore. When we ran into each other, we ignored each other as if the other didn't exist. The neighbors treated her with absolute contempt. Mrs. Davis kept her promise and stopped serving her at the corner store. Josephine now had to walk 5 extra blocks to shop elsewhere. The neighbor women would point their fingers at her when she passed by. They would mutter things aloud for her to hear. Husband stealer, shameless, homewrecker. One day, about 2 months after the divorce, Josephine knocked on my door. I was very surprised to see her standing there. I didn't know what she wanted. I opened the door, but I didn't invite her in. I asked her what she wanted. She said with a trembling voice that she wanted to talk to me, that she needed to explain things, that she needed me to know her side of the story. I told her I wasn't interested in her version, that the facts were the facts, that she had a relationship with my husband for 12 years, that she had 2 children with him, that there was no explanation that could justify it. Josephine started to cry. She told me that she really loved him, that she had truly fallen in love, that she never wanted to hurt me, that things just happened. I told her that those were the exact same cheap excuses Arthur had given me, that they were both adults who made conscious decisions, that they knew perfectly well what they were doing, that they deliberately kept me deceived for years. Josephine tried to keep talking, but I closed the door in her face. I didn't want to hear any more. The truth is, I didn't feel sorry for her. I didn't feel compassion. I only felt rage every time I saw her. As I leaned against the door, my heart wasn't even pounding. The rage I thought I felt was already fading, replaced by finality. She wanted to explain her Times love story, asterisk her Times justification. She was trying to make her Times truth matter. But in my house, standing in the hallway that Times had cleaned for 47 years, the only story that mattered anymore was mine. Her version was just noise. I had spent my entire adult life listening to other people's noise. I was done. The following months were difficult, but also liberating. For the first time in decades, I was living alone. I could do whatever I wanted, eat whatever I wanted, watch television whenever I wanted, sleep in late if I felt like it. I didn't have to cook for anyone but myself. I didn't have to wash anyone else's clothes. I didn't have to worry about having the house perfect for when Arthur arrived. It was a strange but wonderful freedom. Emily still came over for lunch on Sundays. That tradition never changed, but now it was different. Now we cooked together, we laughed, we watched movies, we talked about everything. Michael visited me more often. He also came with Jessica and the kids every month and a half. We spent whole weekends together. The children filled the house with laughter and energy. Little by little, I started building a new life. A life without Arthur. A life where I was the center, not just someone's invisible wife. I signed up for knitting classes at the community center. I met other women my age, some also divorced, others widows, all with stories to tell. We formed a group of friends. We would get together on Wednesday afternoons to knit and chat. We shared recipes. We told each other about our lives. We supported each other. For the first time in many, many years, I felt like I had real friends, not just acquaintances, but true friends. I also started doing things I had always wanted to do but never dared. I dyed my hair a lighter brown shade. I bought new, modern clothes. I would get dressed up even if I wasn't going anywhere special. One day, I looked in the mirror and almost didn't recognize myself. I looked different, younger, more alive, more myself. Emily told me one afternoon that she had never seen me so happy, that despite all the horrible things that had happened, something good had come out of it, that I had reclaimed my own life. And she was right. I had reclaimed my life, a life I had put on pause for 47 years to dedicate completely to a man who didn't value it. As for Ethan and Mia, the secret children, I decided to get to know them properly. It wasn't their fault they were born. It wasn't their fault, the situation they were in. They were innocent victims just like me. One day, several months after the divorce, I invited them to my house. I asked Ethan to come with Mia. They both arrived nervous, not knowing what to expect. I made them hot chocolate and sweet rolls. We sat in the living room. I told them I wanted them to know that I had nothing against them, that I understood they hadn't asked to be born into this complicated situation, that I didn't blame them for anything. Ethan started to cry. He told me he had always been afraid that I hated them, that his mother Josephine always told them I was mean, but now he realized it wasn't true. Mia, more shy, asked me if I was her family too. I told her yes, that technically I was her father's stepmother, even though we were divorced now, that Michael and Emily were her half-siblings. Mia's eyes lit up. She told me she had always wanted to meet her older siblings. I promised her I would arrange it, that when Michael and Emily were ready, we would organize a meeting. That meeting with Ethan and Mia gave me a peace I didn't expect. To see that despite all the pain and betrayal, I could choose not to perpetuate the hate. I could choose to be better than the circumstances. Eventually, I organized a meeting between all the siblings. Michael and Emily met Ethan and Mia. It was awkward at first. No one knew exactly what to say, but little by little they started to talk. They discovered they had things in common, the same gestures, the same expressions. Michael taught Ethan about accounting because the boy was interested in studying that. Emily gave Mia some books because she found out she loved to read. They didn't become close immediately, but we planted the seeds of a relationship that could grow over time. As for the relationship with Arthur, it became practically non-existent. He deposited the alimony punctually every month, but we didn't talk, we didn't see each other. Occasionally, news of him would reach me through the gossipy neighbors, that he was still living with Josephine, that he was still working at the hardware store, that he looked sad and aged. I didn't feel sorry for him. He had made his choices, now he had to live with the consequences. The neighbors gradually stopped talking so much about the scandal. There would always be gossip, but it was no longer the main topic of conversation. Life went on. Mr. Thompson still greeted me when he swept his sidewalk. Mrs. Davis saved the best tomatoes for me at her store. The neighbor women included me in their chats. Slowly, very slowly, I began to feel that my life had purpose again. It wasn't the life I had planned when I got married, young and in love at 24. But it was my life, and it was okay. One December afternoon, almost a year after discovering everything, I was sitting on my porch drinking coffee and watching the sunset. Emily arrived unexpectedly with a bag of sweet rolls and sat down next to me. She asked me what I was thinking about. I told her I was thinking about everything that had happened, about how my life had completely changed in a year, about how, despite the terrible pain, I had found a version of myself I didn't know. Emily took my hand. She told me she was proud of me, that I had faced the situation with dignity, that many women would have stayed quiet, enduring in silence. But I had chosen the truth, even though it hurt. I told her I didn't know if I had done the right thing, that sometimes I wondered if it would have been better not to know, to live in ignorance. Emily shook her head. She told me that the truth was always better than a lie, even if it hurt, that I deserved to live my life based on reality, not on an illusion. And she was right. Now, almost 3 years after that birthday that changed everything, I can say that my life is completely different. I still live in the same house in the Fan District, but it's no longer the house where I waited for a cheating husband. It's my house, my space, my sanctuary. The alimony Arthur gives me is enough to live comfortably. I'm not rich, but I don't lack anything. I supplement it with some small jobs I do from home. I make cakes to order for parties. I knit blankets that I sell at the Sunday market. My children visit me regularly. Michael comes every 2 months with his whole family. Emily still comes every Sunday without fail. Ethan and Mia also visit me from time to time. The relationship with them has strengthened. I'm not their mom, but I'm someone who genuinely cares about them. My knitting group of friends has become fundamental in my life. We support each other in everything. We celebrate our birthdays together. We accompany each other to doctor's appointments. We are a chosen family. I have learned to enjoy my solitude, to not feel lonely, even though I live alone. They are different things. The woman who waited 47 years for her husband to notice her hair is gone. That woman was invisible. The woman I am now is visible, most importantly, to myself. I choose my own colors. I choose my own schedule. The silence in my house is no longer the sound of waiting. It is the sound of peace. It's the sound of me, finally listening to what I want. I get up when I want, eat what I want. I watch my favorite shows, read books I always wanted to read. I go for walks in the park in the afternoons. I have a simple but full life. Sometimes, when I'm lying in bed at night before sleep, I think about everything that happened, about the 6 years of the exercise lie, the 12 full years of betrayal, and I don't feel so much anger anymore. Time has softened the sharp pain. Now it's more of a melancholic sadness, an acceptance that that's how things were. I haven't completely forgiven Arthur. I don't know if I ever will, but I have made peace with what happened. I have accepted that it was part of my story, but it doesn't define who I am. That birthday party wasn't revenge. It was a release the moment I took back control of my own story after 47 years of living like a shadow. The most painful part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing I had been living in an illusion for decades. Today, almost 3 years later, I am no longer the cheated wife. I am Charlotte. I am 70 years old, a grandmother, a friend, and a woman who is finally free. I have found peace in my knitting, on Sundays with my daughter, and even in the budding relationship with Ethan and Mia, the innocent children caught in this mess. Now, I am wide awake. My story has ended, but I know there are so many others waiting to be heard. If you believe in the power of truth, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you for being here with me.